Welcome back to True Disaster. In today's episode, I will tell the story of an extremely unfortunate and truly terrifying cave diving disaster. If you're not already subscribed, be sure to hit that button, as I'd really love to reach 1k. And with that said, let's get into this episode's True Disaster. Low Birkwith Cave is a horizontal stream cave situated in northern England. It forms part of an extensive cave system throughout Bentham and is notorious for its silty beds and narrow passageways. This difficult terrain has deterred many divers, leaving significant portions of the cave system unexplored for decades. The cave was last explored over 30 years ago by the legendary diver Oliver Statham, who is most famous for his record-breaking dive in the underground Eager, and he in fact noted that Birkwith Cave is an exceptionally difficult and dangerous cave to dive in. The cave is a particularly problematic place to explore, not only because of the narrow passageways and large amounts of silt, but there was something far more dangerous lurking in the water of Birkwith Cave. 29-year-old Colin Pryer was an avid explorer. Although he had only been diving for about 4 years, he started caving at the age of 11 with the Scouts, so had a lot of experience and a deep passion for exploring cave systems. Through this love for caves, he would end up meeting Gemma Stone at the Subterranean Society. Gemma, just like Colin, was an eager cave explorer. With this shared passion, the two hit it off straight away and started dating. After this, they became pretty much inseparable, not only on land but also in the water. They'd often go out on the weekends 3 or even 4 times a month to dive together. After many successful dives, the pair were always on the lookout for new places they could explore. One of these places they were looking into was Birkwith Cave, a site that had not been properly explored since the 1970s. This prospect truly excited the couple, and it was decided that Birkwith Cave would be their next dive. The cave's reputation for danger was highlighted in 1994 when Trevor Kemp, an inexperienced diver, disappeared in the final 20-metre sump during a through trip from Old Ing to Birkwith. His body was found the next day, just 3 metres from the guideline. Despite these dangers, Colin Pryer and his partner Gemma Stone were eager to explore Birkwith Cave. On the day of their planned dive, Colin and Gemma were ready to embark on a journey to the cave's lesser explored sections. They carried all of their dive gear into the cave and headed down to the underwater sections. Once there, they began gearing up and checking their equipment. They were both extremely excited to get into the water, since this was a cave that only a few people had ever dove in. But just moments before their dive, they received a distressing phone call. Their friend, Stuart Anderson, was trapped in a nearby cave. Without hesitation, they postponed their dive to assist in the rescue of their friend, and thankfully they would manage to help Stuart. They were extremely happy that he was okay, but of course they were a bit upset that they didn't get to explore Birkwith. But they knew at some point that they would be going back. The urge to go back was so strong for Colin that he arranged it for the very next weekend. But due to a busy work schedule, Gemma was unable to join him, but he told Gemma that he would be leaving the cave after the dive at around 3:30 PM. Colin entered the cave alone, carrying all the diving gear he needed for the expedition. Upon reaching the dive spot, he meticulously assembled his equipment, double-checking his pressure gauge, regulator, and other critical pieces of equipment. Excitement surged through him as he prepared to explore Birkwith, a place almost untouched for 30 years. The thrill of potentially discovering an unexplored passageway and being the first person in history to chart it drove him onward. After going through his final safety checks, Colin was satisfied that everything was working perfectly and plunged into the water to begin his dive. During his dive, Colin frequently checked his dive computer and pressure gauge, closely monitoring his air supply. Cave diving, though inherently risky, comes with recommended safety precautions to ensure a safe and successful dive. Key among these is always keeping an eye on and following the guideline through the cave. Additionally, the rule of thirds is crucial. Divers use 1/3 of their air supply for the descent and exploration, another third for the return journey, and keep the final third as a reserve for emergencies. Colin adhered to these precautions diligently on every dive. However, one critical oversight on this particular dive was that he was diving completely alone. As Colin travelled through the winding passageways, he encountered various loose bits of old guideline left from the previous dive 30 years ago. After some time of exploration, he noticed his pressure gauge had dropped by 1/3, signalling that it was time to start heading back to the entrance. Despite his desire to venture further and deeper into the cave, Colin knew it was time to turn back. Reluctantly, he pivoted on the spot and began following the guideline back to the cave entrance. Halfway back to the entrance, he felt a slight tug against his body. He dismissed it and continued, but just a few seconds later, another tug completely halted his movement. Colin's heart sank as he realized what was happening. Despite not wanting to believe it, he knew he had become tangled in the old line he'd been seeing around the cave. Reaching for his knife, Colin frantically tried to cut the line wrapped around him. The task, however, was incredibly difficult to manage alone. Panic set in as he struggled against the entanglement. Each movement seemed to just tighten the line further, and as if things couldn't get any worse, during his panic, he had completely disturbed the silt on the bottom, and he was now fighting against the line with no visibility. Back at work, Gemma awaited Colin's phone call, but it never came. She grew anxious and reported the situation. But by the time rescuers arrived at the cave, any hope for a rescue had faded, and it was clear that it would now be a recovery mission. The brave recovery divers located Colin 512 foot into the cave, trapped in a submerged passageway. The rescuers noted that his body was so severely wrapped in the line that it was completely obvious what had happened. Thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button. But until the next true disaster, it's goodbye from me.